all around the world. Hey, it is live and loud with the Lord. Nelson, that is. And we have a very, very special guest, affectionately, we call him KG, Mr. Kerry Gilbert, that I had to have him on the show, man, because he's that guy. He's something like my boy Relentless says. He says that you just like want to know good human beings. And that's hard to find. And Mr. Gilbert, Kerry Gilbert, KG is a great human being. And just, hey, respect to you, my brother. Thank you for being here. I really, really appreciate it. And
respect back to you, man.
I'm going to ask you a few questions. I mean, I could have sent you the questions, but I was like, let's not send them the questions. I'm not going to ask you anything to get you in any trouble or anything crazy. but like Mike Martin, though, Mike Martin told me this. He said, if it's something that I don't want to answer, he said, I'm going to do this right here. But he messed with me and did it one time, but it was all love, though.
Well,
man,
my background's public relations, so hopefully I can talk my way out of it. Basically, when it comes to we'll see though. We'll see how that plays out.
All right, so starting it off, give us a little history about where you're from, and tell us who's that movie star they always say you look like.
That's funny. So I'm from a little town in West Georgia, man. Basically, if you go towards Alabama from Atlanta, the very last exit before you get to Alabama, that's where I'm from. It's home to a little place called Tallapoosa. Fortunately, last exit before you cross over to Alabama. My dad was military, though. I'm a military brat, so fortunately, I got to see a little more of the world than just Tallapoosa. Nothing wrong with Tallapoosa, but there's a big wide world out there. So fortunately, we got to see a little bit of it. We moved around mostly the Southeast when I was a kid. We lived overseas for a couple of years. Lived over in Turkey. Dad was stationed over in Turkey for a couple of years, which was something into of itself. It was really cool though. The good thing about it is, it teaches you how to make friends in a hurry because we moved around about every 2 years. So we were fortunate. We would usually move during the summer, so we didn't leave in the middle of the school year. But you get good at making new friends quick because you only have them for a couple of years. Anyway, so ended up moving back to West Georgia, lived in West Georgia most of my adult years, and then ended up moving up to Charlotte, which is around the time you and I met.
Right.
And I know you're probably going to ask about this, but worked in NASCAR for a number of years, which is most of it's based out of Charlotte. So I know we'll talk more about that. But now I'm living a little further west out here. We talked about that. Kind of towards the middle of the country now. As far as who I look like, I'll take the lid off here, and it's I've been told I look like Michael Chiklis from the Shield and from the Commission. And I actually got a picture with him. That
I remember.
Yeah. So and then I've also been told I look like the guy from Pawn Stars. So whatever. And then I'm sure people that don't like me will tell me that I look like Uncle Fester from. Is it Fester? So, I guess when I hadn't got any sleep and I got the bags happening.
Hey, man, it's all love.
Yeah, but there you go, man. So hopefully that gives you a little background.
Oh, no, that's great. That's great. Okay. Now, you are a big music fan, and I've had the pleasure of being on stage with you. Were we in Charlotte during that time, or was it in Columbia?
I think we did both, man. Rich, when you were with Stuck Mojo, I know you probably referenced this on the show quite a bit, but when you were, I met Rich. Little background on that, if you care to hear about that.
Of course.
I had become a fan of Stuck Mojo in the late 90s. A friend of mine took me to go see him down in Macon, the original lineup. This is right before they recorded the live album, Heavy One. And man, it was, if you ever witnessed it, and I mean, you were part of it, but especially in when it was really at its apex. Man, it was I had never seen anything like it. The energy exchange between them and the audience was unrivaled. And you certainly carried that on and did a wonderful job of that yourself. So please don't think I'm selling you short on that.
We're good. It was something special. Yes.
Yeah. So I ended up becoming friends with Rich, and he was a NASCAR fan. He came out to a few races, and we got tight. And then I was fortunate to meet you when you joined the band, and we were talking before we got on air. I think that some of the stuff you did was some of the best stuff they ever did. Yeah. And you're fortunate. I was lucky to be off the road one weekend when I was doing the NASCAR thing, because I was gone pretty much every weekend. But just so happened, I think it was Columbia one night. You guys were playing. I came down, and and Rich is kind enough to let me get up on stage and, you know, make a fool of myself. And,
no, sir. And see, that's what the thing. Listen, even in my notes, you hit that high note.
Yeah.
Listen, I was just like, man, I looked over at you. I was just like, wait a minute, you know, what's going on here? So, were you in a band before?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, yeah, man, you know, growing up, I got into, you know, around the time we were in Turkey, got into Kiss and, you know, Ted Nugent, and, you know, that sort of thing. Then Judas Priest and, you know, Van Halen. Van Halen was the one, man.
Right.
Was fortunate to see them back in their heyday. But anyway, yeah, so I started singing in cover bands. I never did any really original stuff, but yeah, there may even be some video evidence on YouTube. Yeah, absolutely. But it was all cover band stuff, you know. It was and the stuff that was big around that time. So it was, you know, mid '80s, late '80s. So it was, you know, Rat, Van Halen, Whitesnake, you know, Judas Priest, you know, any of that stuff, man. So you know, that's a long time removed now. I do karaoke every now and then, but otherwise that's about the extent of my.
KG, you got the pipes, man. You got the
thank
pipes.
You, man.
There's no doubt, because I'm telling you, on stage, and I was just like, okay, and then I was like, wow. I was like, wow, man, holy catastrophe. I said, okay, he's a true singer.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, man.
No, it took me to those days of the 70s and those 80s, and where they take it to that, you know, hair metal bands and everything like that.
I was a hair metal singer without hair, man. That was it.
So, all right, next question. So you're a Georgia Bulldog fan?
Yeah, it's been a good year, man. It's been a good year. So, a little more on my background there. So, I had graduated from a college out in West Georgia, and I kind of bummed around and singing in bands and doing live DJ work and this and that. And then I got interested in NASCAR, and I have zero mechanical ability. So I'm like, well, if I wanted to work in NASCAR, how could I get involved in that? And I was like, well, I know how to write. You know, I with a mass communications degree. So I said, how can I get involved in NASCAR? And I said, I know they need publicists. I know there's publicists involved. So I ended up going to UGA, University of Georgia, and got my master's in public relations.
Okay.
And and then I ended up getting an internship and blah, blah, blah. I managed to work my way into the sport. So yeah, I'm a Bulldog fan through and through, man. Where I live now is actually a university town. So, but my wife and I, we proudly display and it's a rival university, but we proudly display our Georgia flag in the yard. I don't know how the neighbors feel about it, but you know, when you're national champions, they can't get too mad at you.
There's nothing that they can say. Hey, listen,
right?
Because my daughter actually, she works at University of Georgia, and she's getting her doctorate.
Oh, wow, man.
Yeah. So she's doing work. Amazing. So she's down there. We go down there every so often. Actually, she's down there. My son is down there also with his her twin brother. So he's down there also.
Oh, man.
Yeah, they're twins.
That's awesome.
So no, it's love. It's love.
Yeah, and it's a very cool, it's a cool town, man. I really love Athens. You've got a special place
bigger than I thought it was. Every time I go, I'm just like, man, it's way bigger than I thought it was.
Yeah, it's man, and it's just, you know, of course we all know the music scene that came out of there.
Right,
and,
right, indeed.
You know, yeah, and actually that's, you know, I got to see Mojo there, Stuck Mojo there a couple times back in the late '90s. Yeah, they'd come over occasionally. So yeah, great town, man. Hope to get back there soon and visit. Yeah,
no doubt.
Georgia Bulldog.
Yeah, man. Okay, so now let's get into it.
Okay,
we already touched on it a little bit, but let's talk about NASCAR and talk about once again your time with NASCAR, how you got into it. You kind of touched on that again, but let's be a little bit thorough about it, because I think it's amazing.
Well, yeah, man, it's you know, a buddy of mine told me one time, he said, man, you set a goal and you achieved it. And I was kind of like, you know, you don't see the forest for the trees sometimes. And I was like, well, you know what? Yeah, I did, man. I did. So yeah. So the story on that is, I'll try and give you the quick version here is,
take your time.
Went to the University of Georgia, was working on my master's degree. Just so happened there was a gentleman in Lawrenceville, Georgia, which is, you know, on the way between Atlanta and Athens. And his name, Hal Price is his name. Well, the cool thing about Hal is he was the head of sports marketing for Coca-Cola around 1995, 1996. Well, there was this new driver coming up. Some guy didn't end up doing much. His name was Jeff Gordon. So they ended up signing Jeff to Coca-Cola. I'll give you a little more about Hal, though, because this is some pretty cool stuff. So when Hal was at Coca-Cola was right around the time they were filming the Tom Cruise movie Days of Thunder.
Okay.
So the Hollywood guys came to Coke and they said, hey, we were making this movie with Tom Cruise. We'd like Coca-Cola to be his sponsor in the movie. And Hal said, but hold on just a second. He's a rookie driver in the movie, right? And they're like, yeah, he's a rookie. He's like, Coca-Cola would never sponsor a rookie.
Right.
He said, but I tell you what, we got this brand Mellow Yellow that's not doing anything. It's getting its butt kicked by Mountain Dew. So I tell you what, we'll put Mellow Yellow on the car because, you know, we can't damage that brand. That brand has zero recognition.
Right.
So once they put that on the car, I promise you there's a point here. He ended up saying, well, we need to get a driver on the track in a Mellow Yellow car. So they ended up hiring Kyle Petty, Richard Petty's son. And if you remember back in the day, he was kind of, he almost looked like a rock star because he had the long hair and the mustache. Yeah. Well, man, that first summer, it made Mellow Yellow so popular that they could not make the soda syrup fast enough. They were selling out. Wow. Anyway, so from that, you know, he ended up developing a relationship with Jeff Gordon, and then he's like, you know what, I want to get out of this. And Gordon said, well, why don't you come be my marketing manager? And so he did. And over about a 2-year period, he ended up grossing about $30 million in endorsements for Jeff Gordon. They ended up taking Jeff Gordon to Pepsi. He had close-up toothpaste. Right. He had Kellogg's Frosted Mini.
Yes,
he had all these, and that was all Hal. Anyway, he and Gordon ended up like splitting, and he started his own marketing agency. Well, I ended up being able to be an intern for him. Okay. And he was had a number of different clients. So from that's how I got into the sport. It's actually how I met my wife. She was an intern there as well. Wow. After a couple of years, you know, the only problem with NASCAR is, you know, sponsors come and sponsors go. And, you know, when the sponsors go away, your job goes away. So he told me, he's like, look, I hadn't got anything for you next year. So I managed to find a job up in Charlotte. I had met a couple drivers and had become friendly enough with them to where one of them said, hey, why don't you come be my PR guy? Right. Really, really good dude, a kid named Hank Parker Jr. His father is Hank Parker, who is the fisherman, if you're familiar with him.
I definitely watched Hank Parker show. I don't want to start singing the song.
That's great, man. So yeah. I don't know if we ever talked about this, but yeah, Hank Parker Jr. Hank's got 4 kids. 4 kids, yeah. 3 of them are boys, 1 of them's girls. I'm good friends with 2 of the brothers. Hank was a great kid, great driver. So I was his PR guy for a couple of years. And the thing is, you know, NASCAR is a pretty incestuous sport in that once you get your foot in the door and you show that you're not a complete idiot, you know, you can kind of move around. People get to know you and you can find another job. So worked with Hank a couple of years. That sponsorship fell by the wayside. Ended up finding another job. Probably the biggest drivers I worked with over the course of my career was in 2004. There was this young kid that Lowe's was sponsoring in one of the lower series. If you know anything about NASCAR, there are 3 big series. One is the Truck Series, and one is now called Xfinity, but at the time it was called Busch Series because it was sponsored by Busch Beer. Right. For many years. And that's almost like AAA Farm, you know, as far as like baseball. So Kyle Busch, 18 years old, had just come into the sport, and I was his first publicist in the sport. Really? And now obviously he's got 2 championships and however many wins. But anyway, yeah, so I ended up working in the sport, you know, with different drivers. Probably the other biggest guy I worked with was Kevin Harvick for a time.
Kevin Harvick, right.
That was around 2009. And then when I left him, I ended up going to work for Sprint, and Sprint was the title sponsor. It was called the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series for, I think, about 10 years altogether. So when in that job, my job was, I was kind of the go-between between the NASCAR media and Sprint. So whenever they wanted to talk about the sponsorship, or I was kind of their go-to guy. Did that for a couple of years, and then ended up working for, before it became Fox Sports 1, it was called Speed Channel. If you remember Speed Channel. Yeah, and I did their social media. So I was the voice of NASCAR on Speed. So yeah, anyway, altogether, you count it all up, I spent about 15 seasons doing it. Yeah. So, but I'm happy to talk more about that. What else do you want to know about?
No, it's love. I mean, I want to talk about that. I know that Greg, my boy Greg, that you got down, you know, he and his wife at the time. He was like, make sure you tell Kerry we appreciate it so much, because they had such a great time. He's like, it's one of the most memorable times that we just talked about it. We talk about it still a lot to this day. He's just like, man, KG, man, he's just like, oh my goodness, it was so amazing. It was just a wonderful. So, I asked him, I was like, how loud was it down there? He was just like, oh my gosh. He said, it's just, he said, here it is. We're thinking we're just going to the stands. He's like, but no, we go down and we're just like, we're seeing everybody. And it's just like unbelievable. And, they struck up a friendship. I can't remember what the guy is, but one of the pit crew of one of the, I don't know, it was Dale Earnhardt Jr., one of his people. And
cool.
They struck up a friendship with him, and they were just like, oh man, it's just the greatest thing ever. He just wanted me to make sure that I told you hello and thank you so much, because he appreciated it so much, really.
Oh, that's the cool thing about the sport. You get a little, like anything else, when you're in the middle of it, you kind of, you get kind of take it for granted. But then somebody comes in that's excited to be there, and it's new to them, and you can, I was fortunate. I had the ability to take people around, and I could get them in the garage area.
Right.
I knew enough drivers. I could take them around and introduce them to drivers. And, that's the thing about the cool thing about NASCAR is, if you know somebody like anything else, but you can get in there and you can walk up to a driver and say hello. And, it's weird. It's almost like you're in the locker room of let's just, I'll just say Atlanta Falcons just for Georgia.
Right.
But, it's like you get to be in the locker room until like 5 minutes before kickoff. And, and then finally they're like, hey, you got to go. But, you're sitting there talking to the quarterback, right up until they're about kickoff, So, yeah, I had a lot of fun doing that, man, and made a lot of good friends, and, still have a lot of good friends in the sport. Yeah, I will. This is one thing I'll tell you about it. People always ask me, hey, why did you get out of it? Well, it's a young man's game, man.
Okay.
Because it's a ton of travel. It's they start, actually they're racing this weekend out at the LA Coliseum. I don't know if you paid any attention, but they have built a 1/4-mile asphalt racetrack in the LA Coliseum.
Really?
And they're racing there this weekend. But they're going to go from this weekend until I have to look at the schedule, but maybe the week before Thanksgiving. So, February through November, and you're talking 38 events per year. So only a couple of those are in Charlotte where you can sleep in your own bed. So everything else, you're either driving to the racetrack or you're flying. And it's rental cars and hotels. And it's kind of like being a musician on tour from this respect. I know you can relate to that, but the good thing is that you do get to go home every week, but you're only home for like a day or two,
Gotcha.
So you get home on Monday, you do your laundry, pay your bills, still got to go to work. And then Thursday you're back out on the road again, as opposed to, you guys were out, 6, 8, 10 weeks at a time. So, but you know what I'm talking about as far as, and that's all cool when you're very young and when you first get out of school. But, after you've seen some of these places a few times, you're like, okay, I don't know if I ever need to go back to Dover, Delaware. And there's nothing wrong with Dover, Delaware. But, the problem is, though, you'll end up talking to your friends and you'll be like, what are you doing tonight? Oh, we're going to get together and have a cookout. Okay, cool. What are you doing? I'm going to watch, I don't know, HGTV on the, the hotel or whatever. So, but you know what? I wouldn't trade it for anything, man. It's, the main thing I will tell you is that, there's so many people that wish they had the opportunity to do what I did. And, and I got to see a lot of things and meet a lot of people. And, so yeah, I got no complaints, man. But, there was a time I figured it up, and I think I went to over 15 years. I probably went to 450 races, and so, at some point you're like, okay, I've been there, I've done that.
I hear you. It's kind of like with Chris Jericho was talking. He was just like, yeah, man, I'm about to get on the plane and fly here, and I'm about to go here, and I'm about to go here. And, it's that busy schedule, but you're out there to please those fans, man. They're waiting to see you. And I know the NASCAR thing is just because they've got a test also driving. You've already touched on this. You already touched on something. You went into it already, but forgive me for putting my glasses on. I want to make sure it's clear. So,
man, I'm rocking the contacts, man. So it's not, trust me, it's not like I'm not rocking 20/20 over here.
It's all love. So I've never been to an actual race, and it's kind of what you've already touched on. But I passed Darlington because when my son went to Coker College, it was right there close to Darlington. It was right the next town over.
Sure.
And then Daytona, I've been by there. Talladega.
Yeah.
As I was going to Mississippi, to oh my goodness. I was just like, this is unbelievable. And then of course, Charlotte Speedway. So those are the ones that I've seen.
Sure.
So the love for NASCAR is amazing. People really love it. So what do you attribute this love to?
Oh, well, I think it's a lot to do with the personalities in the sport. The drivers, they, a lot of those guys are very much, down to earth, very, there's always some divas in anything you do, but I think that's part of it. It's very relatable to people. I think obviously they love the speed. Everybody loves speed, I mean, let's face it, man, some people like to see crashes too, we're all guilty of rubbernecking on the highway.
Right.
But I mean, we need to get you out to a race. So now I'm gonna make that a priority of getting you guys out to a race. But being there in person and being in the grandstands and having the cars go by you at at Talladega and Daytona, you're talking 200 plus miles an hour on the straightaway. And you're talking 43. Well, they've lowered the fields now, but let's just say 40 cars going by you at 200 miles an hour, and the air, just the air, the movement is insane. And so seeing that in person, and that's the thing about, they do a great job on the TV coverage with multiple angles and replays and all that. But there's something to be said for sitting in the stands and feeling, that much power going by you. I think that's got a lot to do with it, And the thing that's working against them now, though, is the car culture is not what it used to be. And I know you've got some kids that, kids are waiting longer to get their driver's licenses now. In some cases, they're more interested in, having a car that's dependable as opposed to, wanting the one with the, the 4-barrel carburetor and the, you know what I'm saying?
It has changed, indeed.
Yeah, it definitely has changed, and I mean, let's face it, the muscle cars in the 70s, there's nothing there's a few that are being produced now that are along those lines, but yeah, I think that's the main thing. I think people love the personalities and certainly love the speed, and it is a spectacle, man. I mean, it's something to see in person for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I can just remember there's a video out there where the lady is walking, and I don't know if you've seen it, and they're coming by and the wind is so strong it knocks her and she bumps into somebody else. I mean, I was just like, wow, but just hearing it is just so crazy. And for them, I don't think really a lot of people don't understand if they're not really into NASCAR like that, is to drive at that speed and have the confidence to do what you do. It's got to be the nerve. You've got to have something about you to want to do something like that. Because just at that moment, anything can happen at that speed is crazy. And then what don't they use the restrictor plates now in the big races? They used to go faster than that.
Yeah, they did. They did. I want to say the record was Bill Elliott did. I want to say, and don't quote me on this, but I want to say he hit 220 at Talladega. The thing is, those, as you know, though, there's all different size tracks, and so you just rattled off a bunch of different. So, Daytona and Talladega are about. Daytona's 2.5 miles. Talladega is 2.66 miles, and those are the ones that need the restrictor plates because they also have. I want to say again, don't quote me on this. It's been a while since I've looked them up, but 32 or 34 degree banking. So I was lucky enough to walk the banking at Talladega. But when you get to the top, literally you have to turn around and like sit down on your butt and scoot back down the track because it's such a steep angle. Yeah, and that lends itself to the speed. But then you got tracks like even like a Bristol. It's only a half mile, but it's also high high banks. So you can get some really good speeds going there,
Really?
And then like I want to say Darlington is like a 1.3 mile. I want to say. So yeah, a lot of those tracks are. I mean, they're pretty good size. They can get going. But the crazy thing is this weekend at LA Coliseum. I don't know when this will end up being released, but it's only a quarter mile. Really? So they are. I mean, they are just going to be. There's not going to be any fenders left on those cars, man.
It's still 500 miles.
I think it's a much shorter race. Again, I'd need to. I didn't do my prep, so somebody will have to look that up for me. But again, I don't think they could make it 500 miles. They'd probably only be like 3 cars left in the race.
Okay, so who is your favorite driver?
Who's my favorite driver? Okay, so when I got into the sport and was interested in the sport, became a fan. Jeff Gordon was my guy because that was like mid '90s. And yeah. So, but I'll tell you, as far as the coolest guy, because I got to know some of them, and well, he's not a current driver, although he is now racing IndyCar. Jimmy Johnson, who's won 7 championships.
Yeah.
The reason I appreciate him, though, is what you see is what you get. He is literally no different in person than what you see on TV.
Gotcha.
And it's a minor thing, but whenever he would see you in the garage, he would always make a point of saying, "Hey, Kerry, how you doing, man? Good to see you," kind of thing. Which doesn't sound like much, but trust me, there's a lot of drivers who hadn't had nearly his success who look right past you, And so, yeah, man, genuine dude, really cool. There's a story where he helped out my wife one day out in Vegas. She was having a problem with her car, and he ended up giving her a ride to the track and almost made himself late for practice as a result. So it was, in other words, he didn't really know her, so he didn't have to go out of his way. So just really cool dude, man. So I'll pick him.
It goes back to being a good human being, man. Because
it does.
And I always tell people the world's not crazy. It's the people in it that are crazy. that's a Lord Nelson quote. Is one of my young guys is like, that's a Lord Nelson quote. I said, I really mean that too. I said, because it's
amen.
I said, people are something else. They really are.
Amen. And I will say though, that's one good thing about NASCAR is there's a lot of good people. People ask me, do you miss NASCAR? And my quote is, I miss the people. I don't miss the grind. Okay. Because there are some really, really good people in that sport. So, unfortunately, I managed to stay in touch with quite a few of them. So, yeah.
Awesomeness.
What you got next for me?
Awesome. Hey, listen, man. So, back to the tracks. What is the best short track, and what is the best super speedway?
Okay, Bristol Motor Speedway is the best short track, in my opinion. It's concrete, it's high banked, but the way that it's built, it almost is built like a coliseum. I mean, there's 100. They may have reduced the seating, but at one point it could hold 160,000 people. Wow. So it's literally as far as the eye could see up on either side of you. So, but the cool thing is that you're right on top of everybody. So, as you're sitting in the stands looking down on the track, I mean, you're not going to miss anything because it's only a half mile long. So I would say Bristol. Super Speedway. Well, so true super speedway is anything 2 miles and over. So you got Michigan, you got, let's see here. But I'm probably a sucker for probably Talladega. Just because, man, it's if you want to go see a party, man, the infield it's a freak show in the infield at Talladega. Because people make a weekend of it. They come to camp and they let their freak flags fly, man. They get loose. That's a good thing and a bad thing. But yeah. So I'll just say Talladega, just because it's a lot.
Yeah, I know that when we were going to Mississippi, and it was the weekend, and there they were, and we looked over there, and I was just like, because the first time I went to Mississippi a long time ago, I was telling my wife, I was like, "What is that?" And she was like, and I was like, "Where are we?" I was like, "Is that Talladega?" I said, "Is that it right there?" And she was just like, "I don't know." I was just like, "Babe, is that?" So I was like, man, so now I'm really like, wow. So one of the times we're coming through the races, and you could just see from the highway. I'm like, oh my goodness. It was amazing.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Yeah, a lot of camping out there, and it's right off the highway, like you said. You can see the racetrack as you're going past there. If you do ever find yourself over there, you have an extra hour or two to kill. They have the International Motorsports Hall of Fame there, right next to the track. And it has got some really, really cool cars. It's got a couple of rocket cars in there that have set like land speed records in the Bonneville Salt Flats. It's got a lot of old cool NASCAR cars from different Dale Earnhardt, and a lot of it rotates. So I don't want to tell you exactly what's in there. Go and it may not be there, but everything from dragsters to I want to say at one time I saw one of the speedboats on the water, like the cigarette boats that they race with. But yeah, I highly recommend if you're ever over there, you got an hour or two to kill.
Indeed.
You can take a tour of the track too, but you can hit the International Motorsports.
I most definitely have to put that on something I'll do. Because I
it's cool.
A lot of the guys, me coming up from the Richard Pettys to the Cale Yarboroughs to the Bill Elliott's and Jeff Gordon's and of course Dale Earnhardt and who's some more guys? Darrell Waltrip.
Sure.
Those guys were so good. I know I'm missing some guys, but
oh, there's a ton. Right, Rusty Wallace,
who drove the Skull Bandit car?
Oh, Harry Gant.
Harry Gant. See, all those guys, man, I just remember that. I remember so much of them, and Richard Petty was that guy. Richard Petty was that guy, man. He was just, his disposition was cool. And it's like when Kyle came, it's just like, kind of like with Dale Earnhardt Jr., it's like, you want them to win, you know, to take over from what their fathers did. And I know there's a lot of fathers and sons, you know, that do it, you know, but man, I mean, listen, Richard Petty was my guy back then. It's just like, he's just the coolest guy ever, man.
Well, he's still the coolest guy, man. He's in his 80s going to the racetrack every week, sporting those cowboy hats. And I know Kyle, and my wife knows Kyle a little bit. And even crazier than that, though, was back to the Hal Price, the gentleman that introduced me to the sport or got me my first job in the sport. One of his clients was Adam Petty, Kyle's son.
Okay.
And he and Kyle are very tight. They got tight during the Mellow Yellow years.
Right.
So my wife ran Adam Petty's fan club. And so, and as you may or may not know, Adam ended up passing away in a crash at New Hampshire in 2000. But yeah, I was fortunate to get to know him a little bit, man. He was a cool kid. It's one of those where you're like, man, I wonder what might have been, you know, I mean, what kind of talent did we see, you know, that we lost as a result of that, you know, and then of course, losing him and then losing Dale Earnhardt, you know, 6 or 8 months later. And of course, that was the catalyst for the big change where the safety really got stepped up, you know. So, you know, if there's anything that came out of those deaths, it was the fact that I want to say since Dale Earnhardt, there might have been one more, but I think there's only been like one death in NASCAR since then. And before that, it was,
that's probably
it wasn't all that often, but it was certainly much
more. Hitting the dude, right?
What's that now?
Smoke. What's my man's name? The nickname Smoke.
Tony Stewart. Tony Stewart. Oh, you're talking about him? Yeah, he was at a sprint car race.
Because you got a fishtail and hit the dude.
Yeah. Another driver. They had gotten into it, and the other driver got out and came down the track. And wow, that was
because he was a great driver. He was a great driver also. He was.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and a little aside on that, I don't know if you know, but he's married a I can't remember her name. I'm gonna draw a blank on her name, but she drives a Top Fuel dragster, and so he started a NHRA team.
Really?
So yeah, she's driving for him. So yeah,
not the Force.
Not John Force. I mean, they'll be competing against.
Right.
Yeah, but yeah, she like I said, she's a Top Fuel dragster driver, and if you look on YouTube, you'll find some videos where he learned how to drive a Top Fuel dragster.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
It's still in him. It'll never leave.
Yeah. Well, he's somebody that's driven everything always. You know, he does sprint cars all the time. And I know him a little bit. Certainly, he knows my face, but he's always been cool to me. But I tell you what, he's one of those. When he got to the racetrack,
focused.
Man, he put the business face on.
Yeah.
And anything that wasn't involved in that race car, he had zero time for.
Wow. Well, that's what made him so good, because he was a great driver.
I was gonna say, I'm not gonna hate on that, man.
Right.
And you know, it is, you know, to him, it was anything that didn't involve driving the car was a distraction.
I got you.
It's an important part of it, but again, I get where he's coming from too.
Yeah.
So
some people can be more free and enjoy themselves, and you know, I understand.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now, you already touched on it. Also, the truck series. Did you get to be around a lot of that? The truck series. How was that?
I'll tell you, it's really cool because it's very much grassroots, and those guys are not making a lot of money doing that. It seems like it's either, you know, for people on the way up or people that have kind of peaked and are on the downside of their career.
Okay.
But it's incredibly competitive though, because the races are typically shorter, so they've got kind of more of a, you know, you need to put your foot in the gas and let's make this happen, because we don't have 500 miles to do this, right? But the reality, no, I wasn't around it a lot, just simply because the way that it typically worked is it was, you know, the Cup Series would be the headliner for the weekend, and the Busch Series would typically be the support race on the day before Saturday. Well, a lot of times the truck races were somewhere else.
Oh, really?
I know a few truck drivers, and I've been to a few races whenever they do have. Sometimes they have like triple header weekends where it'll be, you know, trucks, Xfinity.
Right, because I was going to ask you that. Yeah, that we're at the same place. Yeah.
but yeah, I never really was, around it too much. But I mean, essentially, the trucks are basically just cars with truck bodies on them.
I got you.
So
Yeah,
when you get right down to it,
because I know it seemed like before I guess all the pandemic stuff, you used to really see they were like really pushing the trucks. They were pushing the trucks serious.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then,
yeah.
I haven't seen it as much. So,
Well, you'll see it all the time. I think it's on FS1, but I'll tell you what, some of the most exciting racing in NASCAR happens in there because again, it's a 200-mile race versus a 500-mile race, and it's like they don't have time to sit back. It's like, if you're in my way, buddy, I got to go.
It's just the way they look, man. NASCAR and trucks and all, they just always had a look that I always thought that there'd be more of that out there on the street, right? Meaning like cars that look just like that. I know they're so low to the ground and everything because I was at Walmart and I don't know if it was Martin Truex or somebody's car was in front of Walmart. I'm not saying it was him, but it was. Is there another Martin guy? His car was kind of like black and yellow, maybe. I can't remember what his name was.
Well, you know what? The reality is that all those guys have so many different sponsors now. Back in the day, you would have like a Rusty Wallace had Miller Lite or Miller Genuine Draft for the entire season. Now it's more like 8 races here. So it could have been Martin Truex.
Okay.
Who, by the way, I will tell you, I got to know him a little bit too, because he, when Kyle Busch was running the Busch Series car that year, he and Martin were the two that battled it out for the championship.
Okay.
And Martin ended up winning it, but I got to know him a little bit. He's another one. He's pretty quiet dude, but he's really cool. Another one that, what you see is what you get. What were you going to say about the cars? You said you saw it outside of Walmart.
I saw the car. I was just like, man, who gets in this car? Because it was so low. You see exotic cars and the sports cars are so low, and I was just like, how do they get in here? I'm looking at me. I'm 6'5", big guy. I'm just like, I couldn't get in that car. I was just like, wow, but it still looks so cool to me.
Yeah, well, you could. I mean, Michael Waltrip, I want to say 6'2" or 6'3". He's been retired for a few years, but he can get in there. The thing is once you get in, you are incredibly low to the point of where you hear stories about guys that their seat is so low to the floor pan, and there's so little a heat shield underneath them that they literally have burned their butts or their backs, or burning your heels is very, very common. So a lot of times they will, because it's about driver comfort to a point, but it's all about speed, right? Anything they can do to shave a few ounces off that car and still make weight, they're going to do. So a lot of the drivers, you will see them, they have heel shields. They will literally strap these heel shields to the back of their driving shoes. But even then, sometimes it will still burn through there, and they will burn their heels. So yeah, they are sitting as low in that car as they possibly can, because the lower you are to the ground, less drag.
And everything. It's amazing that people really don't know. There's so much more that goes into it because it's extremely technical. There's so much technical stuff going in, back in the pits and back in the, there's a lot of stuff going on. It's like you always hear it like, oh, well, they got fined or whatever because this was, when they go do their checks or whatever like that. Everybody's trying to get that edge. That's unbelievable. Yeah. Well,
to that point, there are so many engineers on any given team. I mean, just a room full of engineers, and then there's some that go to the track, but back in the day, it's not the days of just shade tree mechanics by any means. And it hasn't been for decades, so I don't want to make it seem like it's a recent thing, but it's all about, simulations, and they have these rigs that they put the car on there, and it'll simulate. They can actually simulate the car going around the track. They've actually mapped the track.
Technology.
Certainly the wind tunnel comes into effect. One of the teams that I worked with actually owns the owner of the team owns a wind tunnel up in Charlotte. It's actually a rolling wind tunnel. So when you strap the car down, it's actually on a huge treadmill.
Right.
That can run 190 miles an hour. God. And then you blow the wind over the car to, see how aerodynamically well it's performing. But to your point, they're looking to shave tenths of a second. It's not even seconds, it's tenths of a second. They're looking to shave, and insane amounts of engineering. And to your point, they've gotten so much more strict in a lot of ways. They're trying to encourage innovation without encouraging but you know, it still applies. If you're not cheating, you're not trying. You know what I mean? I mean, that's absolutely true, you know, and there's any number of ways you can do that. You know, and I'm not savvy enough to know what they are.
Right. I got you.
But there's a million ways. Here's an old school story that I used to tell when I would give pit tours. Back in the day, Darrell Waltrip, you know, the tubing, the steel tubing inside the cars is hollow, right? So they would fill the tubing with lead shot, like buckshot, like literally out of a shotgun shell. And so the car would make weight, so it would be the right weight. Well, then he would get out on the track, and he had like a little thing that he could pull,
let it out,
and it would let the BBs out or the lead shot out. And the way that he ended up getting caught apparently was like there were teams behind him that were like, "Man, there's a bunch of crap bouncing up off the track," and it was that. The other thing I heard about him though was he had some weight on the passenger side. Because again, you have to have a certain amount of weight on this side of the car, a certain amount on this side, and you have to have a total number that matches what NASCAR wants. The weight was on the passenger side. It was on little casters, little wheels.
Okay.
So as soon as he went off into the turn, the first time he made a left turn, the weight would roll under his seat, and it would put more weight on the left-hand side and make it easier to turn going into the turns. And the way he ended up getting caught on that is the little wheels ended up like leaving little black marks, like skid marks on the right-hand side of the car. So an inspector looked in there and he's like, what?
Right.
And they figured out that he had,
that is so crazy, man. But
again,
but
that's
the things that you always, the stuff that goes on, because it's about winning. It's about winning, man. I mean, listen, all the money that's spent in that sport is so much about winning. And then, you know, you got Brad Daugherty that's in there. I always used to love like, Brad, what are you big tall? You know, because he's got the countries. You know, he's so country. And then, you know, of course, Michael Jordan getting into it. And, you know, it's so much more inclusive now. And really when it was something more like it was Southern. It was like, you know, because I'm from the South, so it was always like it was a Southern thing. But then as you speak about like Bristol and Michigan and all these other places in California, I mean, people drive cars, you know, and people love to do that. And I remember we were on tour with Volbeat and their lighting guy, Niller. We were in Switzerland somewhere, and we were all having a conversation. We were talking about NASCAR, and they were talking about Formula One and things like that. And I was just like, you do know NASCAR is better than Formula One. I'm just starting stuff, just having. And they were like, who wants to see somebody go around and around in a circle? I was like, wait a minute. I said, do you know the speed that they travel? And I said, even our Indy car is better than that right there. You know, they were like, you're out of your mind. It's like, it takes talent to drive like this and do, and which it does. It's amazing what they do over there. I said, but come on, man. NASCAR is what's going on. And we laughed about it, but it was just like a great conversation. We just went back and forth about it, man. It was unbelievable.
Well, you know, that is one of the complaints about NASCAR is that it was, you know, it was all a lot of ovals and a lot of turning left. But, you know, now there's probably, and again, I don't have my figures handy, but there's like 6 or 7 road course races on the schedule now. And certainly those cars aren't nearly as responsive as an F1 car, which I like. I've gotten into F1. I think a lot of people have. Have you seen the Netflix?
I haven't watched it, but I know what you're talking about. I haven't watched it.
It apparently it's really caused a huge upswing in popularity in F1 in America. And I don't know if you know, but they have a race in Austin, F1 race. They're having one in Miami next year. Really? And apparently they're talking to Las Vegas about doing a night race on the strip. Really? Yeah, F1 cars. So yeah, I get it. I understand what you're saying. But it's
that's what they know. And I was just like, it's all up. It's all up.
Yeah.
So what was I going to ask about that? Anyway, I can't remember. I'm old now. What automakers are in NASCAR?
Let's see. There is Chevy, Ford, and Toyota are the 3. You know, Dodge was in it.
Right. No, go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, Dodge was in it for a number of years, and there's been a lot of buzz that Dodge may be getting back in, but you know, I haven't seen. I'll believe it when I see it, right? You know, but
so I guess when I saw Toyota get into it, I was just like, because you know, it was always domestic cars, it was always us, and so I was just like, wow, you know, what made that happen like that? I mean, did they just say like, hey, you know, it probably has to do with money also, but I mean, I don't know. Maybe you know.
I think to a point that it's still, you know, at one time it was win on Sunday, sell on Monday. You know, if a Chevy won on Sunday, there would be an uptick at the dealership.
Really?
On
You know, I'm
Monday.
not even thinking
Yeah.
about stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now I don't know that applies nearly as much anymore because, you know, the days of that, or at least when that was really the big thing, it was, you know, it was stock cars. They were literally, you know, it's always been called stock car racing, but it was stock cars, you know. And now it's very little about nothing about that thing in stock, you know.
Okay.
But I think Toyota just realized, because there's such a huge, you know, retailer in the U.S. now, and the reality is, you know, and there's purists who will say, you know, if it ain't a bow tie or a Ford, I'm not, you know,
Right.
it's you know. But the reality is that, as you know, as we become more globalized, there's almost more Toyotas being built in the U.S. than there is, you know, the other manufacturers, you know. And I mostly work with Chevy teams. I don't know that I'm thinking about it. I don't think I ever worked with a Toyota team. I may have worked exclusively with Chevy teams as it comes to think. Oh, Pontiac. I worked with Ricky Craven 1 year, and that was Pontiac, which was a GM product though.
Right.
And it went away. You know, a lot of the Pontiac, Buick, a lot of those went away. So now it's just Chevy, Ford, and Toyota.
Chevy, Ford, and Toyota.
Yeah, but I think Toyota enjoys the cachet of being, you know, a winner in the sport. You know, they would obviously Kyle Busch has won a couple championships, and they do really well in drag racing, NHRA as well. You know, they're very
really.
Oh yeah.
Now, I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Listen, that's something. I even watched a little thing on History Channel where they were talking about Toyota and how it's TA, but it used to be DA, but they changed it for a reason. I can't remember what it was. Yeah, it was Toyota. It was DA, but they changed it to TA. Yeah, they changed it to TA because of some reason. I can't remember. Man, I'm saying this is back when they were first started building the cars, because they used to build something else. I can't remember what it is. It was something they were talking about Japan and stuff like. It was beautiful. They talked about Porsche. They talked about Porsche, and they talked about all the cars like that. It's great. I love history stuff like that. So
cool. What I was going to tell you though is, speaking of NHRA, you definitely need to go up to Charlotte. There's the drag strip is just right next to Charlotte Motor Speedway. Okay. And it's 4 lanes wide though, you know, because typically a drag race is 2 cars. Well, and I want to say in either April or May of every year, they have they call it the 4 wides. And so they line up 4 dragsters or 4 Top Fuel or 4, at the same time. So you're talking, each of those cars is about 40,000 horsepower. All right. So you're talking literally, I mean, it's insanity, man. It's 40,000. Yeah, I think I'm right on that. I may be wrong. Anyway, the point being, when those 4 take off at the same time, the air vibrates. Yeah. And I know that sounds crazy to you, but it's almost like you see the air moving as they go by it. It's insanity. And the noise level is insane. And so they're going 1,000 feet in less than 4 seconds, you know?
I got chills. I got chills. Listen, I picture everything. I'm that kind of person. I'm very visual. So I see it. And I know that when I was younger, to see you see the dragsters, love, but it was something about the funny cars. Yeah. When they lifted that up and you see, it was just always something about them. And you know, when I was young, I had the little funny cars, and I don't know, you probably had them when you were young too. Listen, all I know, man, is that stuff was so great. I probably watched more drag races and stuff as a youth than anything, because, you know, coming on ABC Wide World of Sports, you know, that kind of stuff like that. I mean, I was on it, man. You know, my brothers and sisters used to look at me like, you're kind of a weirdo. And I was just like, no. I was like, do you know how cool this is? I was like, this is so cool, man. But anyway,
yeah, do you know how fast these cars are going? Absolutely. And I was fortunate from that perspective as well. My dad was, you know, he was a big car guy. So you know, he was more into drag racing than he was oval racing. So I was fortunate, like 6, 7 years old, we got to go to an NHRA event down in Gainesville, the Gator Nationals, which has been around for years. And so, you know, that's what I was, you know, learned from. So yes. So do me a favor, you and your son, or, you know, whoever you can get to go with you. Trust me, once they go, even if they go reluctantly, they're going to walk out of there with a whole new attitude. Go to the 4 wide nationals. Go on Saturday, because Sunday is the elimination day. Tickets are more expensive and it's more crowded. Right. Go on Saturday. Don't even buy a reserve side. You can just go on the visitor side. Save yourself a few bucks there as well. But trust me, it's like nothing you've ever witnessed in person, man. And the other cool thing, back to the access thing, is the cool thing about NHRA is every ticket is a pit pass. So you can walk down into the pits and watch. You can be 10 feet away from them while they're working on the car. You know? Yeah. So highly recommend that. Absolutely.
Listen, I'm definitely. I'm excited about it. Listen, I'm excited about it. Next question.
Yeah.
You're good though, everything love. You still see me well. You still see me well, everything's love.
I'm sorry, one more time.
I said, you still see me well, everything's love looking.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at stuff. It's all good.
Okay.
I'm not cutting that. Everything is love. Next question. Have you ever driven a NASCAR or had a ride in one at a high rate of speed?
I absolutely have. I was very fortunate. So back to Martin Truex Jr. In 04, he won the championship.
Okay.
They ended up having the banquet at one of the hotels on the Universal theme park property there. And so what they did, they took us out to Walt Disney World. There used to be a Speedway at Walt Disney World. They actually had some truck races there. And then they would have the Richard Petty driving experience there, which is where you can actually suit up and drive a car.
Right.
So they took a bunch of media out there and they said, hey, you want to ride one? I was like, yeah. So Martin Truex Jr. actually gave me a ride because even though Kyle Busch was my driver, I figured he would try and do something to scare me in the car. So I said, I'm just going to climb in with Martin. And to your point, you made a point about them having the nerve. So, you're going off towards the curve there. You're going off towards the turn. And you're like, at least in my mind, I'm going, okay, you should start turning now.
Right.
You should really start turning now. You should start turning now. And then probably like 2 more beats.
Wow.
Then he turns the wheel, and I mean, it's like, and it slams you feel the G's, you feel the G forces. And of course it stopped just fine. And, he made but those guys have such a different sense of when to hit the brakes and when to turn than we do. And then that was when I got to do a ride along, and that was amazing. And certainly he drove faster than I ever could. But then we went out to Charlotte Motor Speedway one day, and there's multiple driving experiences, and I encourage you to do that as well. Either ride along with somebody or driving yourself. And I got to drive. But I'll be honest with you. I mean, at Charlotte Motor Speedway, those guys get going 170, 180. I think I hit 135, but it feels like it's 400 miles an hour,
Of course.
Yeah. Now they had cones set up and they were like very clear. They were like, you need to start letting off the gas and hitting the brake when you get to this cone. Right.
Wow.
And man, it takes
it takes nerve. It has to.
You just gotta do this.
I mean, you just think if you've ever driven your car at 100 miles an hour. I will say that I have done it before. I've probably been a little bit over that when I had my Maxima or had my Nissan car. I had a 240 SX, and I've had it as coming out of Columbia, headed back my way, and my wife was behind me in another vehicle. She's like, "You got my baby in there." My son was like, "Yes, Dad." I was going so fast, it was just like, wow. Men do stupid stuff. We do stupid stuff.
I get it. I get it.
But he was just like, man, it was just the most unbelievable thing. But yes, indeed, man, to do that is amazing. It really is.
Well, I'll tell you this. Again, I'm from the last exit before you get to Alabama. There's a whole lot of straight Interstate 20 between that exit and the next exit in Alabama. And I may have done a test drive. My stepfather was a car dealer, and he may have let me test drive like one of the really blown up Chevys. And I may have gotten out on I-20 and I may have punched it a little bit. Maybe that happened.
now, let me tell you, the open season video.
Yeah.
So we're in that Nova.
Yeah.
Bill Ebner. Bill, I know you'll be watching this. Bill Ebner, you wild individual. So of course, I'm driving it, right? I never pushed the gas, not one time. And of course, that was a drag. That was a drag car.
Yeah.
I'm just barely no power steering and nothing like that. And I'm turning it and it's just idling, doing what it's doing. I pushed no gas. He said, do not touch the gas pedal. He said, you don't want to touch that gas pedal. I was like, okay. Right. He's like, you can put it on brake. You hit on the brake, but don't touch the gas pedal. Yeah. So I'm driving this thing and it's just like amazing. So after the video shoot, and I think they got a video of it somewhere, we go to the backside of that place where we were shooting this. And he gets in, he's like, You want me to want to take you on a ride? I'm going to get at it. So I'm like, sure.
Come on.
KG, oh my gosh. He hit that gas, and I swear, everything in me was back there. It pinned me to that seat so hard. And I was like, this is the most the power that these vehicles have. People do not understand. I just looked over there at him, and he didn't get all the way on it. He got on it to where it just, I was just like, oh my God. And Rich them just laughed, and but it was amazing. That was really something super, super amazing.
That's funny, man. That's funny. Well, I'll tell you another little story behind that. Now, do you remember that in the trunk, there was all kinds of firearms in there, right? Mm-hmm. Well, so Bill and Rich and some of the other folks, maybe Sean, came to the track the very next day after y'all shot that. So they had spent the day before shooting the open season video with you. Right. And then they came to the track the next day. The thing is, all those firearms are still in the trunk of Bill's car. And he ends up going through security at Atlanta Motor Speedway. Well, let's hope that there's a statute of limitations on that. So, and there was a time there, especially, this was removed from 9/11, but there was a time where they would, check your trunk and, run mirrors under the car. And why they didn't check his trunk that day, I don't know. But had he, he may have still been in jail, man.
Man. So, there was a lot of weapons in that trunk. In the boot, as Simon said.
Well, they were still there the next day, man. And anyway. To your point though, on the drag racing stuff, the G's, that's one thing that, I think a lot of people, there's always a debate on whether or not drivers are athletes. And let me just say this, that to be able to withstand the G forces and the heat that those guys do, they have to be in great cardio condition. I know, like Ricky Craven that I used to work with, his thing was in the summer, he would, put on the sweatshirt and put on the windbreaker, and he would put his treadmill out on his back porch in Charlotte in the middle of summer. Right. And he would put it on like 7 angle, and he would just sprint, for 15, 20, 30 minutes at a time to acclimate himself to that heat, and it is legit, because now a lot of those guys, they wear the biometric either watches or pads on their chest and those guys average during a race, their average heart rate is like 120 or 130, right? And then at peak times it gets up to like 170 or 180, and they're burning literally 2,500, 3,500, 4,000 calories. So and in terms of water weight, you always hear it is legit, they will lose between 5 and 7 pounds of water weight.
That's crazy.
Yeah, because you think about it again, we were talking about it's all about speed. So driver comfort to a point, but there's no air conditioning, right?
Right. I was going to ask they wear suits and stuff. What they do? Yeah.
Well, they do. They have a hose typically that goes into the helmet. They have what's called a cool box, right? And a lot of them do now wear what's called cool suits that will pump cool fluid through. But what inevitably happens is, any of that technology, it breaks down. So then you find guys that they end up falling out of the car. I've heard of guys and seen it actually. Guys will get out of the car and pass out. Because the last thing they're going to do, they're not getting out of the car. That's just because if they do, when they change the driver, you take a few minutes. It's going to cost them a ton of positions, which translates into prize money. And then of course it's just a matter of personal pride. These guys aren't going to get out of the car, but so I have seen drivers, and who had to get out of the car, and we had to take them to the infield care center for fluids afterward. And I've seen guys just pretty much almost get out of the car and just pass out as soon as they get out of the car. So I would argue from that perspective, just strictly from the cardiovascular and the intensity level, I certainly think they're athletes.
They're definitely.
And to your point, and to your point also, you were talking about the intensity, talking about a Talladega or a Daytona. I mean, you talking literally, these cars are 8-10 inches off of each other.
Yes.
At 200 miles an hour for, if there's not a caution, you're talking 40, 50 laps at a time. So you're talking 100, 120 miles.
That's right.
With, guys all around you shifting, and you're trying to hold it steady. So, just the intensity and the focus. Because if you get, let your focus waver for a second, you're into that guy next to you, and you take out half the field. So I definitely would argue whenever I hear somebody say it's not a real sport or it's not a they're not athletes, I get really defensive on that because, I've seen these guys pass out when they get out of the car, and I know what it takes for one of them to drive one of those
That is
races.
exactly,
So.
you're definitely correct. That's definitely something. I mean, listen, have you ever, when you're driving, I know if I drive a long time, how uncomfortable it can be driving
Sure.
a very long time. And now these guys are driving at that speed with those G forces, and mentally, you've got to be there the whole time. And that's taxing on you just as much as anything else. Because as you said, to be inches apart, driving that fast. So it's you and I've got to believe that KG knows what he's doing. I'm not thinking that KG's going to slam on the brakes all of a sudden because I'm behind him. We're trying to do this here. It's amazing. It really is. It's amazing. And I know what I wanted to say earlier. The commentators make NASCAR so good. Their excitement, well, I'm going to say for me, it feeds into me because I'm listening to them, and this is this, and this is this. And they're so knowledgeable, they're breaking things down to you that help you along the way. And it's amazing to hear them. And when it starts getting toward the end, oh my gosh, they amp up. And it just goes to another level, man. And it's just so amazing because they put you on the edge. It's just like I tell people, even like, when I was younger, I didn't want to watch golf, but I can watch golf now because I understand it better now that I'm older. I'm not just some young juvenile, I just don't know. But now I get it. And so now even with NASCAR and racing, I get it. I understand there's so much more, many more things going on than we really, really understand. So it's
whenever I had somebody new come to the track, that would be the thing that I would tell them. Is I know you think this is just cars going around in a circle, but once you start breaking down the pit stops and the strategy in terms of the fuel, and okay, if this happens, we're going to go ahead and come in now, and if this happens, we're going to stay out, and there's so much more that goes into it. And to your point on the commentators, I think the TV guys do a wonderful job, but I think even who does a better job are the radio commentators.
Radio guys too. Yeah.
Because they don't even have the benefit. They have to paint the picture.
They're painting the picture.
And so those guys, fortunate to know a number of those guys, Winston Kelly and Dave Moody and Joe Moore. He retired a couple of years ago, but he was on MRN radio, and Doug Rice and all those guys, man. I think they do an amazing job. Sometimes I'll be on the road and I'll turn on the NASCAR race on Sirius, and they just do they do a really good job of putting you there when you're not there.
It's like reading the book. If they can paint that picture to you, that's an amazing thing. Kind of like Steve Harvey. You might not know about Steve Harvey.
Come on, man.
Hold on, not Steve Harvey. I apologize. Paul Harvey.
Stand by for news. And now the rest of the story.
Listen, when I was young, when I was young, man, my parents, man, we would just sit there, and it's amazing. Listen, music and having the right person to talk about it just paints the picture for you so clearly. And he was so good at doing it.
He had such a voice and such a now page 2.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I remember Paul Harvey. I don't even remember him. I have a memory about when we lived in Turkey. He would be coming in over the Air Force radio waves. Paul Harvey, man. Absolutely. Oh, come on, man. I know some Paul Harvey. Yeah.
All right.
But to your point, I mean, there's a lot of guys like that. Dan Rather and
Dan Rather.
I even, as much of a Georgia fan as I am, I know Eli Gold, the voice of the Alabama Crimson Tide, a little bit, and that guy does an amazing job. He's wonderful at what he does. And he used to do NASCAR. Eli did NASCAR for a number of years, and he pulled double duty. Saturday he'd be at Alabama and Sunday NASCAR, and then now obviously he's the voice of Crimson Tide. But man, there's few that do it better than him.
Hey man, amazing.
Yeah.
All right. So, do you miss the excitement?
As I mentioned earlier, I miss the grind.
Right.
I miss the people. I don't miss the grind. There's some of it I miss. Again, but candidly, I haven't been back to a track in probably 9 years now. Again, I still have a lot of friends in the sport. The races, candidly, unless you're running top 10, the races can get a little, monotonous. If you're if you're back there in 25th position and that's where you're going to be, and you're sitting out on the hot asphalt for 4 hours, the other thing was race days were typically very long because when I was in the sport, especially around 2007, 2008, it was really at its peak. So you were talking, Daytona, 250,000 people. So you would have to get there at the crack of dawn, and you would be there from the crack of dawn until, and God forbid you had a rain delay. Because, I remember one year the Daytona 500 went till like 2 a.m. That might've been the year that Montoya ended up hitting the, you remember when Montoya hit the jet dryer? Do you remember that? Do you know what I'm talking about? If you look it up, Montoya somehow lost control of his car and ended up hitting the jet dryer that drives the track. And so like all the fuel dumped out on the track and set the track on fire. Wow. Anyway, that night, I want to say it went till like 1:30 in the morning. So I had been there from like 7 a.m. till like 1:30 in the morning, But man, got to meet a lot of people, there's bands would play at the track, so here goes Lenny Kravitz walking by, and, here goes Tom Cruise walking by, here goes Arnold Schwarzenegger walking by. And that was cool, but you learned very quickly. There was only one time I asked for an autograph. Eddie Van Halen was at Phoenix in 2007. And so I brought a poster that I'd had since 1982 of him. Awesome. And I took it, flew it on the plane, commercial. And I saw him at the back of the media center and went back there. He was very cool. His second wife, who was just fiance at that point, was there. His son, Wolfgang, who's a musician now too, he was there. And anyway, so that aspect of it was really, really cool. But again, what got tiresome was, you get to the airport, oh, my flight's canceled. Now, instead of getting home at this time, I'm not going to get home till this time. Gotcha. If it rained, there were rain delay at the track. There was one time in Michigan, we were supposed to race on Sunday. We didn't race till Tuesday. So, we're hanging out in Ann Arbor, Michigan, which again, fine place, but it ain't home. So, you know what I mean? So the long answer was, there are certainly aspects of it I missed, but there are a lot more aspects that I don't miss.
Gotcha.
But I'll tell you what, man, let me say this. If there's anybody, if there's anybody that's considering it as a career, just go into it with your eyes wide open. Know there's a lot of travel, but it's a lot of fun. Yeah. And it's, if you can get your foot in the door, which is tough, but once you do and show that you know what you're doing, you can make a long career. A friend of mine I saw where she posted today, she's now working her 26th NASCAR season. So you can make a career out of it if it's what you choose to do,
A guy I went to high school with, I hadn't seen him, and this has been many years ago now. His name was Thomas Tillman. And Thomas he was a wild dude. He was a rocker back in the day at high school, just one of those guys. He just knew Thomas was a wild kid. He definitely was. But Thomas, I remember seeing him, and I think we were at a Chinese restaurant or something. And I was like, Thomas. And he was like, hey, what's going on, man? I'm like, I haven't seen him in years. And then he told me that he worked for NASCAR. He was like, yeah, I worked for NASCAR for a while or whatever like that. I can't remember who it was or whatever like that. Because this was like the late 80s, maybe early 90s when I was talking to him. And he was like, yeah, man, I did. I don't know if he worked in the pits or whatever, but he was like, yeah, I worked for NASCAR. And then I this, that. And I just looked at Thomas. I was like, you might be high right now, Thomas. So you're high right now. And he was like, but then he told me, he said he did something crazy to get kicked out of it or whatever, but he worked in it for a while. He was a cool dude, crazy dude. So I just said I would have just mentioned Thomas. I know because he said he worked at NASCAR. What was your most memorable moment while working for NASCAR?
Most memorable moment. It was probably the first time that I got to go to Victory Lane. It was 2001. It was the race out in California at Auto Club Speedway. It was with Hank Parker Jr., Hank Parker's son. And we had not performed really that well during the race, but it came down to fuel mileage. And so our crew chief was like, we're going to gamble. We're going to go for it. And it was one of those where you were like, we're going to run out. There's no way. We're going to run out. We're going to run out. Well, then about 2 laps to go, it's like, we may not run out. So I had to go run and get the Victory Lane bag because, as you may know, there's a thing called the hat dance, in Victory Lane. All you different sponsors, you put on their hats and take photos, right? So I didn't think we were going to win. So the Victory Lane bag was back at the hauler, which was literally at the other end of the speedway. So it was probably a good, somewhere between a quarter and a half mile back to the transporter. So with 2 laps to go, I'm sprinting, and grabbing the bag, and I'm about halfway back to victory lane when I see us cross the finish line. So here I am screaming in the middle of middle of pit road, and everybody around me is like, what are you screaming about, man? Our team didn't win. Anyway, the kid was beside himself, man. It was his first win. He was just ecstatic. We were all ecstatic. It was unexpected. And he did the coolest thing, man. I said, so what do you want to do now? And he's like, I want to go out to the merchandise trailer out on the front stretch, and I want to sign autographs. And I was like, all right. So we hopped on a golf cart and went out there. And it was so crazy because the fans were leaving the stands and they're walking by and they're like, hey. And it's literally the guy that just won the race.
Right,
and, they're coming over.
And they appreciate that like crazy.
Oh, man, I've never heard of it happening. I'm not saying it's never happened, but I have never heard of a driver doing that.
Wow.
And it said a lot about him as a person, but I get it, man. He wanted to go share it with the people, and that was cool too.
Exactly. No, that's love, man. The people cheering with it for him, man. Listen, that's love. All right, we're getting close, man. It's like the last question.
Cool.
This is like a bonus question.
Okay.
KG said it's cool, like he's ready for this to end. I know. I'm enjoying
No. I thought we were going to be, no. It's all good. I got all night, man.
Bonus question. How crazy did it get when Danica Sue Patrick started driving NASCAR? You were there then, right?
Yeah.
How crazy was it when Danica was there?
Now, do you mean just in terms of the media exposure that she got?
All of that, just her driving. I mean, because it's like, did she bring more women to the race? I mean, because every week that camera was on her. The GoDaddy, it was on her. And of course she's a beautiful young lady, and all that added to what was going on. So I was like, it had to be crazy.
The car at race time was absolutely insane. Probably the only person that was rivaled by was certainly Dale Earnhardt Jr.
Okay.
But trying to get around her car, like say at the Daytona 500, I mean, it was 10, 15 people deep. So, for me, I didn't have any reason to be there, so I would just take the long way around,
Right.
Was it good for the sport in terms of exposure? I think it was great to expose anytime you have, anybody other than a white man driving a car, to be candid, just because it's just a rare thing, And now we got Bubba Wallace, and we got Kyle Larson is Asian American. But I mean, let's face it, man, there's still the NASCAR garage does not look like America as much as they might want it to.
Right.
I'm not saying they're not trying to make strides in the right direction, but so anytime I think there's a woman that a little girl can look at and be like, I got somebody to root for, or a Bubba Wallace or a Kyle Larson. I think that's a positive, man. So I think it was really good for the sport from that perspective. I'd love to see more women. There's a couple of other women in small and lower series, but Danica had already kind of made her name in IndyCar before she came over. So, there's a couple other women in the sport, and certainly they're talented drivers. And I think, if they have a little more success, maybe they might. I mean, they're probably never going to reach her level, but I think it'd be good for the sport from that perspective as well. So, they do. NASCAR actually has a team. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but it actually focuses on minority drivers and tries to bring them up. Because here's the reality on it. It's not that, certainly, I mean, back in the day they might have, but now certainly NASCAR is trying to lower any barriers you can to get anybody in, in the sport. But let's just face it, most, kids growing up, unless you're around go-kart racing, unless you're exposed to it at like 7 or 8 years old, it's just really tough for you to get into it,
Yeah, that's something different. Yeah.
And let's face it, there's not a lot of go-kart leagues in downtown Philadelphia or or downtown Atlanta, if you want to say that, for that matter. So I just think it's tougher, but certainly they're trying to make those strides, and but they still got a long way to go too. So anyway.
But look, great human beings like you and it's just people understanding things and people having empathy and people just not closing their minds to stuff, that's why I always say, there's a lot of stuff I just kind of stay away from certain things, because I'm like, I don't have to deal with you. I'm over here doing
But
me.
I will tell you, one place that there is a lot of inroads is that you're seeing a lot of lot of non-white faces is in the pits, man,
Mhm.
because they they're trying to get athletes, so they'll
Okay.
a kid who may not be maybe goes to a junior college or
Mhm.
he's not going to go play pro ball. I mean, he can still get it done,
Right.
and so they need speed and agility
I got
and and accuracy and
Mhm.
so there's a lot of opportunity in that as well. So you're seeing a lot more of that. So that's cool.
Yeah.
That's always a positive. So yeah, those guys, man, talk about athletes. Those guys are insane, man, going over the wall. I remember here's I'll tell you a quick story. A buddy of mine, he was pitting for for Hank Parker Jr.
Mhm.
Hank came in and his brake pedal literally broke. Like he slammed on with both feet and the brake pedal broke.
Really?
Like broke off. And so obviously that released the brakes. And so our front tire changer was running around the front of the car and Hank just basically drove through him. And he ended up on the hood of the car.
Wow.
And ended up tumbling off, but ended up pushing the car back in the pits or into the garage stall.
Mhm.
And that guy got up and completed his stop. And, again, speaking to the athleticism, man, he just kind of, he pole vaulted on top of the car, man. And, but it was insanity, man. So, but those guys
again, as you speak about athletes,
yeah,
those guys out there are athletes, man, and mentally and physically, it's something else to be said about what they're doing, and you have to respect. If you don't respect that, you got a problem. It's just like what people say about golf. Well, go out there and swing that hit that little ball with that doggone club, and break your back and do the. I mean, it's more than what people think it's about. And once again, mental and physical. Yeah, it's a golf course is beautiful. It's a beautiful walk. Looking at everything, I love it, But hey, get out there and play, and you're gonna have a different perspective about everything, man. On the road.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, that was the other cool thing was just watching those guys whenever I would get to go see a pit practice. Just the again, it comes down to they're trying to shave tenths of a second.
Mm-hmm.
If they can get that pit stop down from 12.9 to 12.7, I mean that's significant.
Right.
And again, focus and agility and athleticism. It's there's, to your point, there's so much to it. And I think that was the other thing. Whenever somebody new would come to the track, not just because a lot of times you can't get a sense of the pit stop until you're standing right on top of them, and you see
Right.
the choreography up close, and you're like, wow. I mean, it's like ballet, man. So yeah.
Well, KG, listen, it has been very informative. This has been extremely good for me, and I know everybody's listening. People out there, you're going to enjoy it. If you like NASCAR, if you like racing, and this is why I wanted to have KG on here, because he's going to be a wealth of knowledge. I want to bring on people that know what they're talking about. I can have fun with anybody. I'm fun. I can look in the mirror with myself and have fun. Danica Patrick used to call me, and I told her I'm married. Stop calling me, Danica. I'm not coming to the race. Leave me alone.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, man. Again, I would encourage anybody. Go to a race if you don't feel like spending big bucks for a cup race. Go to an Xfinity race or go to a Truck Series race. They race all over the country. To your point,
Right.
But yeah, definitely go check it out. Give it a try one time. Or watch it a couple Saturdays on TV. See if you get it. But because I think once you find a driver, you can kind of follow. And once you have a little bit more sense of what's going on and what they're trying to achieve with the pit stops and the pit strategy and all that, I think it opens up a whole new world. And they've also gotten smarter in this perspective. They've shortened some of the races. So you're not looking at like a 4-hour commitment, like Xfinity, for example, is shorter races. So, if you don't want to go to a race for 4 hours or you don't want to sit in front of the TV for 4 hours, try one of those out, man. Then it'll be a couple of hours and see if it's something you enjoy. And if at all possible, get out to one though, because there's nothing.
I definitely, I'm gonna get with my son, and we'll probably get with Greg also, and just go hang out and just have a good time. Because I like to hang out with my son. I don't get to hang out with him as much anymore because he's a grown man now. But it's always good when we do hang out. I just laugh at him, and when you like, hey man, I'm still greater than you. I mean, listen, I respect who you are. But Dad is still that guy. Okay,
that's right.
Respect me. I can't push him around anymore because he's really taller than me now. He's not as big as me, but he's pretty strong. I'm not as strong as I used to be, so I just kind of respect him. Like, hey, I'll talk a little noise to him, but that's it.
If you come for the king, you best not miss, right?
That's right. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, this is Live and Loud with the Lord. And to Mr. KG, Kerry Gilbert, thank you so much, sir. I really, really appreciate it. Much love to you.
So I always enjoy talking to you, man.
Yes,
You are. I appreciate your positivity, and I appreciate your attitude, man. And
Thank you,
it's
man.
always love with you. And
Yeah.
man, it's been my pleasure, my honor. Thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate it, man. All
All right,
right.
brother.